First they laugh at you, then they criticize you, and then they celebrate you. It's hard to get through those first two stages. So there's belief in yourself, belief in your concept, and the tenacity to push through when everybody else is turning out the lights.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Founder Hour. We're sitting here with Erik Oberholtzer. He's the co-founder and CEO of Tender Greens. Erik, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess where we really kind of want to start off the story, kind of starting from sort of the beginning, when you're in college, when did you kind of have that epiphany or moment where you wanted to go into culinary arts?
It was the end of the 80s. I was about ready to graduate from college, and I'm walking down 18th Street through Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia. And over the years, I had just fallen in love with hospitality. First hospitality at the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia, then wine. And that was the beginning of the Wine Spectator. And then the great markets of Philadelphia, the Reading Terminal Market and the 9th Street Market, the Italian market. I would just lose myself every week at those markets and developed relationships with the vendors and the products they sold. And I, when I graduated, the 80s was coming to an end. So was the economy. It was falling apart. We were going off to the first Gulf War. And the world was changing dramatically, and I just wanted to pursue something that I was passionate about. It was, at the time, very unconventional to go into food because most of the professionals were coming out of Europe. And I thought I could travel the world by using the language of food to navigate, and it's done well for me.
So Erik, you have this passion for hospitality, for food, but at this point, do you think that this is something that's going to be making you money?
At the time, I didn't know. What I knew was that there were a number of different things that I could do. At the very least, I would learn how to cook by going to culinary school, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I thought it was going to be more of a creative experience, more like going to art school. It wasn't. It was very much a trade experience. It was very blue collar. So that was a bit of a shock. But I wasn't driven so much by money at that moment, although I was coming out of the 80s when money mattered more than anything to anybody. But I thought I could just, lean into my passion, and whether I went into journalism or something else, I figured this was the first step to exploring it. So I wasn't sure. I was unclear. And then once I got to culinary school and started working in professional kitchens, I just fell in love with the energy of the kitchens. It was very much like the energy that one gets on the soccer field. I was a soccer player, and you're just in the moment. There's no time to think. You have to pivot real time. You have to think on your feet, literally. And there's something brutal about it, but also really exhilarating. And I tapped into that exhilaration.
So at this time, did you have it in your mind that you wanted to start your own business and that kind of entrepreneurial drive, or was it more like you knew you had to, get your, certification degree and then go into a large hospitality group or restaurant and become an executive chef there? What was kind of the goal for you?
Yeah, well, like I said, I wasn't sure. But I knew I had to learn first through culinary school, and then very quickly I realized that the true learning was in the kitchens, in the best kitchens at that time in New England, and then very, very, very quickly I turned my sights to Northern California. What was happening in Berkeley and San Francisco and Napa and Sonoma was exactly where I wanted to be. So as soon as I came out of culinary school, I headed to Berkeley and spent 10 years cooking through the best kitchens of the San Francisco Bay Area. And with each experience, I got deeper and deeper and deeper into the passion of food, and my point of view was shaped. And it really became, for those years, just defining my voice and perfecting my craft, always with a thought that eventually I wanted, like everybody, to open their own restaurant. And the game at that time was, you get to the point of chef, and then if you do well, eventually people get take notice, and it's usually the regular guest who has a lot of money and backs the chef. That was sort of the progression. So I had to go through those years of achieving the executive chef post, and then gaining the attention of someone who might back me.
So Erik, you get to that point, you moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, you're cooking for 10 years, and now you're talking about, having the power of somebody backing you up. Was there a moment like that where you either knew or somebody approached you and said, hey, it's time for you to move on from what you're doing and do your own thing?
Yeah, I would say 6 months into taking over Shutters on the Beach, I moved from San Francisco to Santa Monica to run Shutters on the Beach. And very quickly I realized that this was going to be my last stop. It's an amazing property, but the room for creative expression, and my just internal need to be fully in charge of the creative expression, across the entire system, wasn't going to happen unless I was doing my own thing. So I started exploring, business opportunities. What does LA need, right? And I started looking at the market. And at first, we landed on this concept called Fishbone, and it was really meant to be sort of an East Coast fish house. I would say Connie and Ted's is probably closest to what we imagined. And Connie and Ted's is the reason that we didn't end up doing it, because our idea, like what's been done at Connie and Ted's, ended up being a very, very expensive project. So we wanted to do something simpler, and landed on Tender Greens. And Tender Greens was a reaction to the LA food scene at the time, which was very, very expensive restaurants with huge build-outs, okay food, really centered on A-list celebrities or people with expense accounts or what have you. And then the fast food culture of Southern California, neither of which I participated in. I cooked in the high end, so I catered to those folks, but on my days off, I wasn't really participating. So I wanted to, in a sense, democratize the slow food movement of Northern California, everything that I loved about Northern California, and bring it to the people.
Yeah, it's really interesting because in any sort of industry, when an entrepreneur or would-be entrepreneur is looking for maybe a gap in the market or a problem to solve, it's really easy to look at, what is there and what's missing from a higher level standpoint of like what the menu looks like, as opposed to everything around it, like the ambiance, the service, the price point, things like that. So I guess what advice would you give to like an entrepreneur in that position when they're, looking at an industry? Like, how did you kind of go about that discovery?
Well, I think you said it. There's a problem to solve, which becomes your why. So why does the world need your product or service? And, I think what we arrived at with Fishbone was LA didn't really need another fish place. There were a lot of good fish places, maybe not quite East Coast style. but there were great sushi restaurants here, great seafood houses. As we really looked at it, LA wasn't in desperate need of another fish restaurant, and ultimately Santa Monica Seafood filled one side of it because we were thinking about a sort of a market component to it, and Connie and Ted's did the other. And there aren't a lot of Connie and Ted's or Santa Monica Seafoods in Los Angeles, so it was a very narrow market, right? Tender Greens, there was nothing. There's no place to get good food with good ingredients at a price point that most of us can afford, at a speed that we can all fit into our busy schedules, and that was, let's say, plant forward, not vegetarian, not vegan, but plant forward, but still craveable, still indulgent, still the kind of food that many of us, certainly me and my partners, cooked for our friends and family at home. And if you think about where we are today relative to where we were when we had the idea 15 years ago, the foodscape is a lot different. And I think we played a big role in that. So you have Santa Monica Seafood and Connie and Ted's on one side, the direction we didn't go. They do a great job. And then you have where there was nothing like Tender Greens. It's a whole category, right? And I would say a somewhat disruptive category if I were to borrow that term out of Silicon Valley. But we along with some others early on sort of defined a new way of eating and looking at restaurants.
So Erik, firstly, I want to disagree with you that I do not believe that statement about we don't need more fish restaurants. I do think that we do. And I think Fishbone would have been a great concept. Because I've been to Boston and Providence, Rhode Island, and all over Rhode Island. And the seafood that you get there, first of all, is completely different than here. I mean, it's like so fresh. It's right from there. But maybe one day down the line we'll see that from Erik. But secondly, I know that you talked and you touched upon it briefly about like why my product, why my service now. What else kind of goes into that? I know I've spoken to you about this before, and you kind of talked about the different whys. I think it was 3 different whys that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Why don't you kind of walk us through that? Because I think that that's something that a lot of folks that are now in the concept stage of their business or just even trying to start up is something that they're missing, or it's something that they're not thinking about until after the fact. Whereas I think that you can kind of tell us it's something that you should be thinking about as you're developing a company.
Yeah. So here it is. So the first why is why does the world need this product and service? Why is it relevant? Why does anybody care? Right? And that forces one to say, is this all about me and my passion, my expression, or is there a need? Is there a demand? The second why is, why now? Why is the timing right? Why are the conditions perfect for this idea? Am I too early? Am I too late? Why is the timing right? And you have to hit it. You have to hit it right. There are a lot of great ideas that are sort of on the bleeding edge and then fail, and somebody comes by 2 years later and kills it, right? And somebody's sitting there saying, well, I had this idea 2 years ago. Yeah, too early, right? Or you're too late and you're at the party too late. And then, I think the third question is, and probably the most important, is why me? Why me? Why am I the one to execute this, to bring it to market? Because it's a lot more than just ideas, and it's a lot more than, appropriate timing. Now you have to execute. And we've heard this over and over in a million different ways that, the world doesn't need any more good ideas. It needs people to execute on one. And it's all about the execution, and that's where, for us at least, it was all about, the years of training, or the years of learning, and in terms of timing, being at that stage of life where we had learned enough, but we were young enough to fail, but also young enough to muscle through what is a journey. Nothing happens overnight. So I think it's really, really important to check in with yourself and say, can I do it? Can I do it alone? I don't recommend it. I recommend partnership. I think in the same way that you take risks when you're out scuba diving or surfing or mountain climbing, whatever you do in life, it's better to have at least one partner. I had two, and that served us really well because then you never have tension, or the tension is always broken by the third. So you always sort of work it out. It's almost like having, being in a marriage with a therapist on retainer. There's always a referee. But I think I really believe it's those three whys. And if you can't get through that, if you can't answer that, then you're going to have a weak business plan and a difficult journey ahead.
Erik, what makes it so hard to execute these ideas? I hear people giving me these ideas all the time. Both of us, I'm sure you hear all these ideas all the time as well. And they're good ideas. You're thinking, okay, I could see that working out. But what makes it so difficult for, people to either execute? Is it them? They don't have the requisite, talent, experience, skill, or is it just that difficult?
It's all difficult. None of this is easy, and that's why I think the entrepreneur is so celebrated today. Because there's a difference between going into business and creating. An entrepreneur, in my view, is somebody who creates something. Somebody who really brings something new to the marketplace, solves for something, a need, a problem, whatever, versus going out and replicating somebody else's idea, maybe executing it better or worse. The other part, is capital. Capital, if you don't have the money, whether you have your own money or you have a network where you can access capital, you don't move. Without money, you don't move the needle. So for us, it took 2.5 years to raise the capital to bring Tender Greens to market. And that's a long time for anybody to believe in their idea, believe in themselves, get rejected because, it's, you've heard this probably a million times, but, first they laugh at you, then they criticize you, and then they celebrate you. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get through those first two stages. So there's belief in yourself, belief in your concept, and the tenacity to push through when everybody else is turning out the lights. And also there's potentially a wealth at the end of the rainbow, but that journey is very difficult. And if you're looking to turn a profit quickly, a personal profit, you're probably in the wrong, certainly not in the restaurant business. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit about that couple years that you were, seeking investment, because when you kind of look at it, the timing of it, is this the right time to start this? 2 years, a lot can happen. A lot can happen to you, a lot can happen to your business, a lot can happen to the market. What was kind of your North Star in those 2 years? Like, why did you really still believe that Tender Greens was going to become successful, even though you hadn't raised any money for 2 years? And I'm assuming you were not, making money elsewhere. You were fully focused on this. So how did you?
Yeah, so so Matt and I stayed gainfully employed at Shutters on the Beach. So 6 months into my tenure at Shutters, I knew that I wanted to do something else. I ended up staying there almost 4 years. So yeah, maybe it was almost 3 years between concept and opening. And we did not give our notice at Shutters until we had a signed lease and construction was ready. So we at least had a job, which is good for the business. So all the capital raised to start the business went into building the restaurant, not in our paychecks. David had left Shutters much earlier, went to the Peninsula Hotel as a cabana server, thinking that was going to be a summer job while he helped to raise money. That ended up being a 2.5-year, stint at the peninsula, which challenged David in a big way, because he went from the director of food and beverage at Shutters on the Beach to, first cabana server, then, the restaurant server. And as much as we've heard servers make a lot of money, it's not enough to pay the mortgage always. So there were some lonely moments at dark bars where we had our finger on the press stop button. Yeah. We were ready to pull the plug, and that's where partnership matters. Because had it been one of us solo, probably would have quit. Probably would have said, what, forget it. I can't do this. It's not going to happen. But when you have each other, you muscle through it. You believe in it. And I think the important thing for me, having now started a number of other things, is, there's the moment where you socialize an idea, just around friends and family, just to get feedback and refine your idea. And then there's that moment when you go public. Yeah. There's a moment when you tell the world, whatever that world is to you. That doesn't mean going on CNN or Bloomberg. It might be
sending a tweet out or something.
Might be a tweet, might be, cocktail party, maybe a throw a party, and you say, we're going to do this. Here's what we're going to do, and everybody cheers and says good luck, and now it's public. And what that does is it creates pressure, because now you don't want to embarrass yourself. You don't want to let people down. You don't want to let yourself down. And it becomes more about reputation, and it's a great motivator to just keep you going. It also creates energy around the idea, which can create, it'd be a vehicle for fundraising or other people helping you out.
Yeah, kind of holding your own feet to the fire in a way.
Yeah.
So in those couple of years, what was the main thing that was making it difficult to find investors, raise money? Was it a market condition? Was it the idea wasn't as refined as you wanted it to be, or was it because you guys were kind of working on it part-time while working, at your respective places? What was kind of the situation?
Yeah, if I were to bullet point it, restaurants are terrible investments, right? So most restaurant investors are investing, at least at that stage, startup stage, in you, the entrepreneur, and generally they don't expect their money back. They might just feel like, it's $10,000 here, and it'll be fun to watch you go. And if I lose it, so what? So you don't get sophisticated investors at that level. You get friends, family, and colleagues who are cheering you on. Secondly, we were competing with a bloated real estate environment. So I had prep cooks who were flipping houses. People were making money in real estate, dumb money. So if you can make, funny money in real estate or tech, why are you going to waste your time and energy and resources on a restaurant? It was a concept that we couldn't point to a competitor. So it was a novel idea back then. So we couldn't say, well, we want to be like whatever, and we're just going to, here's how we're going to differentiate ourselves. So we had people saying, well, nobody's ever made money in the salad business. You guys are out of fine dining. What do you know about quick serve? How, what are your economics going to be? Chipotle's doing at the time, I think $850,000 in AUVs, and they were best in class. So our pro forma was about 1.3. Now we blew that away, but at the time, the volumes didn't make sense. There were a lot of reasons why people thought this would fail. The more sophisticated money. So it made it really difficult. You'd never scaled anything. You've never had a business before. You've only run other people's business, and so when. It's funny, somebody once told me, if you want someone to give you money, ask them ask them for advice. If you want advice from somebody, ask them for money. So we got a lot of advice, and a lot of it was good. Some of it is fun to reflect back on. But at the end of the day, it's like I said, they laugh at you, then they criticize you, and then eventually they come back and say, how can we invest? And by that time, it's too late for them.
So Erik, you started Tender Greens 15 years ago at this point, 15, 16 years at this point. So, that's been a great run, but obviously there were some tough years towards the middle of that.
That was kind of right before the crash, right?
Yeah.
A few years before. Was that
2008, 2009?
Yeah, so we opened 2006.
Okay.
And that was the peak of the market. Everything was going crazy, and then we opened our second restaurant in San Diego. I think it was 2007, which things were starting to sputter. And by 2008 and 9, when we opened like West Hollywood and Hollywood, the lights had gone dark everywhere. I remember it was West Hollywood. For a long time, we were the only ones in that brand new mixed-use building. It was designed as condos, went as apartments, and we were the only tenant. Sunset and Vine, the entire retail portion had been leased out, and then all of those leases fell out, and we slid in. Starbucks, which is there today, was an original tenant, and they were pulling back because they were in trouble at the time. So things were really awful back then. The Wells Fargo went out on one corner, and the bookstore Borders Books went bankrupt and out on the other, and suddenly Hollywood went dark. All of the construction that now you see in Hollywood, all those cranes, were queued up for like 07, 08, and all those projects were defunded and went dark. So we spent the bulk of the crisis doing very well because businesses were going under, and a lot of people were trading down from the high end into Tender Greens, and we had no competition. There was nobody else. The Mendocino Farms had their little place down in downtown LA. Lemonade might have had one or two. There were blips on the screen, but none of us were really competing. So those were incredible years for us. We had great real estate grabs at the time. It was both scary because nobody knew what was going to happen, and there was a lot of depression. I remember the writers' strike. In the middle of the worst year for Hollywood, the writers went out on strike, which impacted us because we're by the studios.
Yeah.
So there were so many things that we were dealing with, but the competitive landscape was favorable to us.
So you make it through the recession. You are now at how many restaurants around 2009, 2010?
By that time, probably like 8 or 9, I would say.
Okay, so 8 or 9 restaurants in the last, in the first about 5 years, and now you guys are near 25?
We just opened our 25th in Century City.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
So let's talk about, scaling the company at this point. You were told in the beginning that, you don't have this experience, you're just cooking elsewhere, growing other people's business, but, how did you learn? Or was it just kind of just, we have these partners, we have a team of people now, and this looks like our next step, like this is what we got to do.
Yeah.
What does that conversation look like for you?
So I think what we probably did right in retrospect was, as we were waiting for the restaurant to be built, we had a lot of time, and we became students of other entrepreneurs, particularly in the food space, but more broadly. And whether it was the Starbucks story or the In-N-Out story or Krispy Kreme or, Cliff Bar, Southwest, we became students both of brands and successful stories. also from not just what we see, these brands as leaders and success stories, but where they could have gone with, the mistakes they made along the way. And then there was also this book called The E-Myth, which is probably the best business book I've ever read. It's a 2-hour read, and it really talks about how the entrepreneur needs to start with a plan to work themselves out of the weeds of the business, and so that they can run the business. And the three of us really stuck to that plan. That in the beginning we did everything. We dug the ditches for the plumbing. We were the night cleaners. We were the prep cooks. We were the we were everything. But we always had a plan to bring in people as needed, and back ourselves out. And that journey never stops, right? It's even to this day. We surround ourselves with professionals, whether it's a professional night cleaner or dishwasher, or it's most recently bringing in Danielle Bruno from Dry Bar as president.
We'll talk about that shortly. It was on my radar, yeah.
But to answer your question, we were I sit here with a lot of gratitude towards those people who offered an hour or two to mentor us. Rick Rosenfeld over at CPK, Rick Federico at P.F. Chang's, and one of our first big investors was a guy by the name of Frank Viscara. He was the number 2 at McDonald's through the 90s turnaround for them, and brought this big company, very systems-minded DNA to us, and he became one of our advisors and is to this day. And what was amazing in the beginning, I have to say, I looked at him and I'm like, yeah, stay away. And he looked at me like I'm this crazy artist. And over the years, we learned from one another, and we developed this mutual respect. So he helped us systematize everything that we did, so we were not a salt and pepper to taste operation anymore, and also professionalize the home office, the corporate office, so that one by one, whether it was HR or finance or marketing or whatever, we brought in professionals versus us doing the best that we could. So we got out of what started as mom and pop into startup, into the sort of the enthusiasm of entrepreneurs, into a more professional operation.
Yeah, which is something that is, extremely difficult to do. So many startups you see almost fail at that point of scalability because either they hire too quickly or they just can't hire the right people for the right jobs. Like, what is the reason behind, or what did you do to kind of make sure that you were always hiring the right people for the right jobs?
Well, so culture is really important, right? So do they fit? Danny Meyer says, can you spend 6 hours on the bus with this person? Mm-hmm. And if you can't, then they're probably not a good cultural fit. Beyond that, then it's skill set. Are they really smart? Are they the best at what they do? And that's a harder thing to answer when you don't know, you've never worked with anybody at that level. With human resources, we brought in Cynthia Yumez, who Matt and I had worked with at Shutters on the Beach, so we already knew her. We had a relationship. We knew she came out of a really buttoned-up organization, and we trusted her, and she built out our human resources department. Lena O'Connor, who is now our CFO, was assigned to our account with Vine Solution. Vine Solution is a group who sort of acts as the outsourced CFO to smaller companies. I had worked with Ed Levine as the chef of Left Bank years before, so I trusted him. And when Lena felt we were ready, she said, it's time for you to bring finance in-house, and I would love to be that person. So we brought her in. So she already was essentially kind of an employee. Same thing with Christina Wong. She had worked for 2 PR agencies. Has been with a brand essentially 9 years. And when we were growing out of her, she encouraged us to bring PR marketing in-house. And she said, I want to do it. So oftentimes it was still in network. All of the chefs that we've hired were from my network, both in LA and San Francisco. So these are people who are not hired guns, they're committed family members, which adds another layer of commitment, not just them to us, but us to them.
So Erik, we talked a lot about, how Tender Greens started and, that journey. Why don't we touch upon a little bit so that our, listeners hear what makes Tender Greens unique? The menu I know is, definitely more healthy, more, like you said, plant forward, but it still has that protein. And I've been to a few of the Tender Greens locations myself, and they're all beautifully designed restaurants. But what makes it different than something else? What makes the experience unique for those that are, going into Tender Greens to have lunch or dinner or whatever other reason they're there for?
I think the big differentiator, the ownable moment for us is every one of the restaurants has a fine dining trained chef. All 25 restaurants have chefs whose culinary resume matches mine or Matt's. There is no other brand in our category who can say that. Other brands have one chef who is at some test kitchen, and then they have people running those restaurants. So that's one. Then how that translates into the food is, the core menu is the kind of food that I like to eat on a daily basis. It's
what would that be?
Let's call it California comfort. It's perfectly roasted or grilled chicken with creamy mashed potatoes and a nice salad, or a steak cooked mid-rare. A fish with olive oil. Getting back to the fish bone, a really good fish with olive oil, lemon, and some parsley. It's simple. It's really good ingredients, prepared simply. Our sort of mantra is buy the really good stuff and don't screw it up.
So Erik, I know that you're big on supply chain and keeping that integrity.
Yeah.
Why don't we kind of talk about that? I know it's something that a lot of people might not be familiar with, and a lot of people think, starting a restaurant, it's simple. You just have a menu concept and boom, you hire a chef, few cooks, and you get it done. But it's really not that easy. And I also think that's why the margins are not that great and probably not a great investment. But talk to us a little bit about your kind of, take on the supply chain and how you maintain that integrity with all now 25 locations of Tender Greens.
Well, if you don't have good ingredients, then you don't have good food. It's that simple. If you don't have great humans, then you don't have good customer service. It's that simple. So from the very beginning, we were tied very closely to our farmers. When Tender Greens was just a menu and a 2-page overview, Matt and I went up to Oxnard to visit with Jeff and Ann Stein of Scarborough Farms, who we had a long-standing relationship with already, and said, look, we've written a menu that's based on a lot of what you grow. We'd love to partner with you. And they were sort of blown away because nobody had ever approached them. They had been growing for the top tables in California and New York for 20 years already, and nobody had really bothered to partner with them. So they invested some money, and we had a deal with them. The first 4 restaurants, each opening, the first $25,000 worth of invoices were not paid in cash; they were paid in equity. And to this day, Scarborough Farms is an investor, is an equity holder, equity partner in Tender Greens. And through the years, we've used that model with a lot of other farmers, now in reverse. So oftentimes what we'll do is front operating capital to smaller farmers who we believe in and we want them to scale up with us. so that they can raise their animals or get the seeds in the ground or do whatever they need, maybe buy a combine. And then they pay us back in ingredients over time. And what that creates is a bond that goes beyond the chef-farmer relationship, and it really becomes more, again, that sort of extended family membership. And when our farmers maybe are up against something, it might be weather, it might be labor, it might be something, oil prices, we help them through that. But also they protect us. So we don't have disruption where others might get some disruption in their supply chain, and that's in price, quality, or quantity. Yeah. And as we enter New York and Boston and other markets, we have partners there, and we've leveraged our relationship now with Danny Meyer and his group, so that we can shore up really important relationships there.
Yeah, so kind of the shift towards sort of the branding aspect, because I know you said that you've been a student of branding and kind of trying to understand how brands become what they become. Obviously, Tender Grinds has an amazing brand. Most recently, you almost went through a rebrand. The logo changed. The name's still the same, but the logo changed and kind of the colors. And kind of explain what that was, due to. Was it just a project, or was there a specific reason?
No, it would have been a very expensive passion project. No, look, when we started, there was nothing that sounded like Tender Greens, looked like Tender Greens, tasted like Tender Greens. As we sat in front of the big screen on the wall and looked at all the brands in the market, not just here in California but across the country, who compete maybe in messaging or name or even category, we realized we had to find a way to differentiate ourselves. So we tasked Paula Shear of Pentagram, who had worked with Danny before on the Shake Shack logo, and we brought her out to California and said, start poking holes in the brand, and we'll give you a lot of room to be creative. And that's what she wanted. She didn't want to come on and make a tweak. She wanted to really create something that was forward-thinking. And, what she really landed on was we need to capture the dynamic nature of Tender Greens. You have these chefs who are creating specials every day, independent of the brand or any other restaurant in the group. And that's where sort of the magic is. So we need to find a way to capture that, that begins to pull attention away from the name Tender Greens and more towards this mark. Mm-hmm. And she imagined something digital. We certainly leveraged that digital format online in the phones. We're not doing it in the restaurant as she had originally contemplated, because that brings up a whole page of challenges. But we went with the G that is made up of a pot on the top with the handle and a plate on the bottom. And empty, it really doesn't say much, right? But activated through the vision and the expression and the creativity of a chef, then it says something. And it's not saying something that's static, but it is saying something that's incredibly dynamic, that might be reflective of the weather, might be reflective of the time of year, the chef's point of view, maybe even the politics of the time, whatever. But we can use that as a window into the brand and what's happening real time, not for a season, but real time. And then we went with red. Mm-hmm. Because everybody else is green and brown and earth tones and blah, blah, blah. So we wanted to go the opposite direction and say, you know what, we're going to go red, we're going to be bold, and we're going to lean into the passion of the chef and the passion that got me into this business, and move with that. And we went with sort of a sleeker design that's more appropriate for the digital age that we're in. Truthfully, Tender Greens was really backwards looking. We looked at the time at the Trader Joe's and the Ben and Jerry's and the folksier, crunchier identities of the past, and that's not where we are anymore. So we wanted to look more into the future, the brand of the future, and that's where we sort of landed with this new identity. And it's been shocking to some. Some people are like, "What have you done?"
I was driving and I was like, "Wait, is that Tender Greens? Like, the logo just changed."
Yeah.
Yeah, and people say, "You're Tender Greens, where's the green?" Well, exactly. That's
the point.
That's the point. And it looks so modern. It's not organic and handmade. Well, yeah, times have changed.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect kind of segue into, you talking about, the growth of the brand now. It's, I think growth might even be the wrong word, but just kind of like the elevation of the brand. And I think you brought up Danielle Bruno earlier, who's now the president of Tender Greens. Is that
That's
correct?
Right.
And so for those that don't know Danielle came from she was the president of Dry Bar, I believe. She worked for Pete's Coffee. She launched Apple stores.
Yeah.
So, I mean, clearly, she's no big deal, if I had to be a little sarcastic there. So what does Danielle add to Tender Greens and the elevation of this brand and company?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say to any entrepreneur or professional executive, this is really important. What I've learned as I've gone through this identity evolution, from chef to restaurant owner to entrepreneur to founder to now CEO, there are different skill sets, there are different expectations, and there are phases that either you need to embrace or not. And I think this is a really important stage, and I'm just speaking about myself, but for anybody who might be in my position out there, that it requires a lot of self-awareness. And you need that self-awareness throughout your career, right? What am I good at? And lean into it. And what am I not good at? And how do I strengthen those weaknesses through partnership? And this would be an example. I perform best, I'm most passionate about solving big problems. So when I look at food justice, or I look at access to better food, or food transparency, or food integrity, these are things that I get really excited about and I can lead with. When we start talking about year-over-year growth, comps, four-wall EBITDA, and all of that stuff, real estate selection outside of our home environment, that's a different skill set. And you can learn it, as I have, but there may not be passion for it. It doesn't get me out of bed getting excited about comps. Danielle is not an entrepreneur, she's an executive, and she is awesome at the game of business. She also has a track record of scaling brands from our phase where we are now to where we want to go. And she's scaled best-in-class brands. I would argue that Dry Bar was incredibly innovative, and they've maintained their market and their lead. Pete's was the first ahead of Starbucks, and they've managed to compete with Starbucks weirdly, even though Starbucks, she points out, has, I think, I don't know how many they have, 20,000, 2,000, whatever. They have a lot of
some stupid amount. Yeah.
They have a lot more than Pete's, which is at about 300. But they feel bigger, and Apple retail, that's just a drop the iPhone moment. That's so she's been there at the magical moment for some of the most important brands of our time. And that was more relevant than her understanding the particulars of the restaurant business, because we're experts in that. But she's an expert in business and scaling a business with elegance, without messing up the culture, without destroying. I wouldn't even say it in the negative. I would say she will take what is magical about Tender Greens and amplify it.
Totally.
So, it's just another opportunity to professionalize our organization, and I think that's incredibly important for anybody out there at any stage. You need to know when you need a professional.
Yeah, so over the last 15 or so years that you've been running Tender Greens and growing it, it seems you've been pretty particular with your locations and where you want to open up and invest in. What does now with Danielle on board, like what does the future look like for Tender Greens?
If I were to hit the easy button, which I've been trying to hit and it's not connected.
Yeah.
If over the next 3 to 4 years we can replicate what we've done here in California on the East Coast, meaning from DC to Boston, with the added learnings of our 11 and a half, 12 years, plus the professionalized team that we have and the incredible board that we have, then I think it'll be a good 3 or 4 years. And then beyond that, we have there are markets like Chicago or Texas. That would be the growth story. The brand story is best in class across categories. Certainly leading with this chef identity, in food as our superpower. There are other brands that do certain things better than us, and that's good, and we'll learn from them, and we'll lead with food and chef talent, which makes us very dynamic. And then continue to show up in the world in a thoughtful way. So lead as an important voice in food policy.
Erik, I know you had mentioned earlier on that after Tender Greens you started working on a few other projects. So just to kind of see what you've been up to in the last couple to few years, what are some of the other projects that you're working on that the listeners can check out or look forward to in the coming years?
Yeah, one of the earliest was the Pete Ballesteri salami company that was incubated in San Diego at our second restaurant by Pietro Ballesteri.
And I saw that you guys is it going to be in Italy, LA?
That's right. So I'm very proud of Pete and his efforts over time. He's at Air One Market. He's at Thrive. He's launching now at Italy with Mario Patali the other day.
Super
and
cool.
That is sort of an example of where we capture something special that a chef is doing, and then we partner with them. So that's it's a partnership between Tender Greens and Pete. And Pete still works with us, but he has this legacy label out there as well. We have our Sustainable Life project on the impact side. That was started 7 or 8 years ago with a mission to shift the cycles of dysfunction in emancipated foster youth through a 6-month paid internship through Tender Greens, and the vision is to scale as we scale. So the more restaurants we have, the more impact we can make, and then scale through story and inspiration. If we can get other entrepreneurs to, take one youth. I was talking to Mayor Garcetti the other night, and he was talking about homelessness, and I asked him, how many businesses do we have in Los Angeles? And it was something like 22,000 or something like that.
And this is the city of Los Angeles.
This is a city, yeah. And I said, well, imagine if every business took one. Whatever they do, right? It doesn't have to be food. But bring in an apprentice for 6 months and see how they do. you almost have a one-for-one, foster youth to business mentor, and you can change things very quickly. And that shifts cycles. It's not feeding the symptom, it's affecting the root cause. And we can't change families, but we can change people's course. And we've proven that through the Sustainable Life Project. We're working with the Global Seed Trust, the Seed Vault, if you've heard of that, in Norway, to reintroduce native and unique varieties of plants back into Southern California. We're going to do it in partnership with Mike Anthony and Danny Meyer in New York, and we've selected a handful of farmers to participate in that, and that's something that if it's successful, every like-minded chef in every great city of the world with their own unique farm network is going to want to participate, which means we can scale an idea very quickly. Something that would have taken several generations to get off the ground 10 years ago can scale in 5 years globally, which means global crop diversity, which is a huge impact in people's relationship with with food and the diversity of crops, and is a sort of a gentle pushback on monocropping and sort of the homogenization of food. So those are some of the exciting things. And the one other thing is, we became the official chef to the LA Chargers and the Galaxy.
Awesome.
And we're talking to some other teams. So professional sports is something that we're getting into. We've been doing it sort of unofficially for many years, but the Chargers and Galaxy relationship has shown us that this could be a real interesting journey for us.
I think it's something that the Lakers might also need. I think that might be the last fuel, that last boost they need to take it to the next level, because they've been pretty disappointing.
Yeah, it's funny when we started talking to the Chargers, they said they approached us and they said we'd love for Tender Greens to become the official chef to the team, which means Monday through Friday,
Yep.
breakfast and lunch we're feeding the team and the coaches and everybody else. And what they said is, look, this is our most important asset, so we need to feed them well. So we're willing to do whatever it takes to bring really good food that they like and that they identify with, which, from a brand perspective, it tells a story of food as a supplement to elite performance, and that you can do it without suffering, right? It's not your trainer's dietary plan of boiled skinless chicken and nori wraps and brown, flavorless rice. You can eat, the way we cook for the team is the way we cook in the restaurants. There's no difference. Same ingredients, same approach to food, same amount, essentially. Some of these, linebackers a little bit more, but, but it's, it is a way of saying, you can eat really well with moments of indulgence and not suffer. It's not a diet. It's not health food. It's just good living.
Erik, I think your story is a prime example of how patience and resilience can ultimately work out when you're focused and work hard at something. Because after all these years, things have been steadily growing, but it seems like things are really falling into place now. Bringing Daniel on board and getting all these partnerships and expanding even more. And I think that's something that every entrepreneur can really learn from is how important that patience is, and not to give up just because you hit one obstacle or things don't look good on the surface. I think we just want to say thank you for being on the show, and we wish you continued success and all the best for your future. We're really excited to see where Tender Greens goes from here, and hopefully we see it on the East Coast pretty soon.
Oh, my pleasure. You'll see us in New York in early February and Boston in March.
Awesome.
Great.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Erik.
Thanks, Erik.
All right, thanks, guys.